We are deeply settled into winter here in Maine, but for some of you, there is an inkling of spring. Many of you may already be thinking about starting some of your garden seeds and preparing for a hectic but productive growing season. In Maine, a great deal of patience is required for planting outdoors. But your seed starts out too soon and a late frost will ruin all of your hard work. So I found other ways to occupy my time in the early days of spring. Many of the wild native plants here are the first to emerge from their slumber, and so I occupy myself with learning their names and their value. Today, I will be sharing with you a few of the wild plants I've come to love and why they would make great additions to your garden. Imagine having a medicine garden made from resilient plants that come back year after year without any effort on your part. With a little consideration and careful planning, a perfect native garden is achievable. But first, a little tea break. So I've always really loved tea kettles. One of my favorite memories growing up in my hometown is getting up every morning with my grandmother. She was a lunch lady at one of the local schools, and she would make some English tea every morning with a little milk and sugar. And she would make it in a tea kettle that looks very much like this one. Just brings back lots of really fond memories, and I just love having this tea kettle around. This is my new tea kettle, which I'm very excited about, though I will always love the classics. This is a glass tea kettle with a built-in stainless steel strainer for teas, and it also is safe to put on the stovetop. And I know it's going to make my husband super happy, because what I used to do is I would put like a tea ball into this tea kettle, especially if I was making decoctions, and sometimes I wouldn't even do that at all. I would just put the ingredients straight into the tea kettle and boil it. Then I would forget that I had done so, and my husband would go to boil water, and it would be either really, really dark old tea water, or it would be clogged with herbs. So I think my husband is also going to be very happy that I have a tea kettle specifically for steeping teas. So I started my very first herb garden about 3 years ago, and I decided that I was going to do a woodworking project all on my own, and that a raised bed would be a good way to go about that. So I made a raised bed that was about 6 feet long and about 2 feet wide. In that I put sage, I planted rosemary, and I planted thyme. And I started all of these from seed. The rosemary didn't grow, but the sage and thyme did very well. And I think where I had planned to have the rosemary, I ended up putting feverfew that first year. And every year after that, I've done annual plants like kale, arugula, just different things that I can switch out. The sage and thyme did really well, and I took the cuttings of the plants, bundled them up, hung them in my windowsill, and dried them. And that was really where I started getting interested in herbs, not only for culinary uses, but exploring their medicinal uses as well. One of the ways I started to build my herb garden was by exploring the plants that grew wild in the area, learning how to identify them, learning their medicinal uses, and eventually transplanting them to areas that I would eventually turn into an herb garden. For the last 2 years, I have had an herb garden on the north side of our house. That was very silly of me, now that I think about it. Just not enough light, and if you're planning to use herbs medicinally, you really want to have vigorous, healthy plants and not just something that, it's there and it's going along and it grows a little bit year after year, but not enough that you can constantly be taking cuttings from it and having it replenish itself quickly. So this year we're moving the herb garden down the hill into the very, very sunny field, and we're going to do most of our herbs in full sun. But before we talk about my plan for the herb garden down in the field, let's talk about some of the herbs that you can find growing wild. I live in Maine, and for those who are outside of the US, Maine is the northernmost state in the interior US. We have long winters, and we usually are not able to start planting anything outdoors until mid to late May. So I'm going to be talking about the plants that I'm able to find growing wild in my area. If you live in the US, chances are you'll be able to find some of these, but just get a book and learn about the edible plants that are regional to your area. All right, so I have a really great list of wild plants here. So mullein is a plant that you can find growing wild. It's very common in disturbed areas and really poor soils. And I talk about mullein a lot. It's really great for the lungs, as well as many other uses. Another plant that you can find is staghorn sumac. So staghorn sumac is actually a small tree, and I absolutely love this plant because it is one of the few plants that grows in Maine that has a very tropical look to it. It's a very fast-growing plant. They have these candle-like seed heads that are red in color, and you can use these sumac berries for teas. They have a slightly smoky, slightly lemony flavor, and in traditional cooking, staghorn sumac was used to make lemonades. I actually made a tea today with that to add some extra lemon flavor to my green tea this morning. Oh, I guess another thing I should mention, while it's a member of the sumac family, it is not poison oak, it's not poison sumac. This is a completely different plant that the berries on it are entirely edible and entirely safe. Another really great plant is goldenrod. Contrary to popular belief, goldenrod is not the plant responsible for seasonal allergies. It is actually a really great plant for allergies. Burdock is another plant that grows wild here. It has very pretty purple flowers that eventually turn into those awful burrs that constantly get stuck in my cat's tails, especially my Maine Coon cat. It seems like every spring and every fall I am picking burdock out of his tail. But it is a very good medicinal plant. You can eat the leaves. You can also use the root medicinally. Self-heal. Self-heal is a lawn weed that is very common here in Maine. You will find it growing in the shaded parts of your lawn. Grows only about to ankle height and has these very pretty purple flowers. Self-heal is just a wonderful plant. You can use all parts of it, the roots, the stem, the leaves, the flowers. To me, it's just a great general wellness herb that I like to add to my tinctures. It's very good for the liver and helping to detoxify your blood and urine. It is also a very popular remedy for people who experience herpes of the mouth or any type of like mouth sore or ulcer. Wild rose is another great medicinal plant. Wild rose or beach rose is actually invasive to Maine. Not too much you can do about that now, so anytime I find it, I try to remove it from an area where I don't want it and incorporate it in an area where I'm mowing. It can spread through its root system, so it will send roots out underneath the ground, and then you'll have like a new plant popping up a few feet from your original rose. So I like to put it somewhere where I'm mowing around the perimeter so that it doesn't have the ability to spread easily. Very useful plant. It is rose petals are a great astringent, and the rose hips, of course, are very high in vitamin C and great for flavoring teas. Wild raspberry is one of my favorites. Raspberry grows pretty much everywhere here in Maine. It grows commonly in areas of disturbance. So in Maine, we have a very big forest industry. When they are harvesting from the forest, they often use heavy equipment, and anywhere those heavy equipment leave tracks or trails, they're called feller buncher trails, you'll often find wild raspberry growing in those old trails. So it's very easy to find, but if you find wild raspberry growing somewhere where it's not in full sun and you're not getting a lot of those big juicy berries, you can also use the leaves leaves. They're an excellent astringent and they're really great for women's health. Very high in calcium and manganese, which are all great for bone health and very good for the uterus. Feverfew is another very common wild herb. Feverfew looks very similar to chamomile, but they're completely different plants. One easy way to identify feverfew is by the smell. Of course, you want to know for sure that it's feverfew first, and then you'll recognize the smell and you'll be able to identify it. It has a very pungent odor. Some people find it unpleasant. I don't mind it so much. It has kind of like a strong honey scent to it. Whereas chamomile typically has an appley scent. And feverfew is actually great for a lot of different things. People used to use it for treating fevers, though I think that's been disproven, though it has been shown to be effective for helping folks who have migraines or just headaches. I personally like to use feverfew as an insect repellent. You can plant it among plants you're trying to protect from certain pests, and the very strong aroma can help mask the plants that you want to protect. And of course, you get to enjoy the pretty button-shaped yellow flowers. And then of course, another one I forgot to mention is wild dandelion. I'm sure everybody knows what dandelion is at this point. You can use all parts of the dandelion, the flowers, the stem, the leaves, and the roots. The roots are great as a detoxifier. I like to use it in springtime tonics and remedies to help detoxify the body after a long winter. The leaves are also really great to add to salads. They have what's called bitters in them, and bitters will help your digestive system. So if you have a sluggish digestive system, adding dandelions to a salad will help your body to produce bile, which helps the bile helps to break down fats and spicy foods that can cause the stomach to be upset. So that's just a few wild plants that you can incorporate into your garden. You can just take these plants and transplant them into an area where you want to use them. I find that it's helpful to learn a little bit more about the plants online or in books so you can know what do they prefer: full sun, shallow soils, poor soils, rich soils, and also learn about whether or not they will compete with other plants. You don't want to introduce something that's going to be invasive and cause problems in your garden. So there's 3 types of herbs you can grow in your garden. There are perennials, which come back year after year. There are annuals, which you would need to reseed each year if they are not self-seeding. And then there are biannuals, which have a 2-year growth cycle. Usually the first growth cycle is vegetative, and then in the second year they will put off seed. So that's something you'll want to keep in mind if you are planning to seed save and ensure that you have the medicinal herbs you prefer year after year. So the great thing about the wild plants is many of these are either perennial or self-seeding. Otherwise you wouldn't find them growing in the wild because somebody would have to plant them year after year. So that's a great way to start an herb garden if you want to have it be somewhat low maintenance using wild plants. So I've already touched on some of the considerations you want to make if you are starting a medicinal garden. Keep your invasive, aggressive plants contained, and do your research and learn about what each plant prefers. Do they like full sun? Do they like partial sun? Or do they prefer to be in the shade? There are a lot of things you want to keep in mind if you want to have healthy, vigorous plants that you can sustainably harvest from. The sustainability part is very important, because if you are using these herbs medicinally, you may find that you need to collect a very large quantity. I have never found I have enough mint on the property. We drink peppermint tea all of the time, and I love to use mint as a flavoring in my other herbal teas, and we usually run out within the first 2 months of using them every single day. Hi, Chucky. Bye, Chucky. So like I said, this year we are starting our herb garden down in the field, and I'm really excited about it. We are getting creative with it. I have built, or we're working on building, a crescent-shaped rock garden that we will backfill in early spring, and then we'll stack up some more rocks because I want this to be at least to knee height, if not a little bit taller than that. and I plan to fill this crescent shape with all sorts of perennial flowering herbs, and just have something that's really beautiful. We've put this in an area that is in the center of our vegetable garden, and my hope is that I will have this really great full sun area to collect herbs, but that it will also serve as a wonderful place for bees and pollinators to congregate and help to pollinate my vegetables as well. So I hope this video helps give you some ideas for starting your own herb garden. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button down below. And if you're new, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I would love to have you here. My name is Danae. I am a gardener and herbalist here in Maine. This is the Acadian Garden and Apothecary, and I will see you in the next video.